As I said with season 2 of Vikings, I have to say this is how you do a finale. The finale of season 3 of Vikings actually was great. It was fantastic. Now, there are a lot of reasons why that is, but I suppose I should start with the plot of this one. Now, the plot, well, it follows up on the previous episode in that Ragnar, after having been baptized, his health continues to deteriorate, and he's basically talking to Bjorn and basically settling his affairs. He's basically saying, I'm dying. He says to Rollo, I'm dying, and he says to Bjorn, one day you're going to have to make these decisions as the king. So he's basically, there's a very strong inclination that he's going to pass away very soon due to his injuries. And there's this real biting conflict from his comrades with them basically saying, if if you truly believe in this baptism, if the gods did not protect you from this baptism, then we will never meet again. You're going to go to heaven, and you're not going to get to go to Valhalla. I mean, how could you do that? You betrayed us. Blah blah blah. While at the same time, the Vikings are still at a loss of what to do about the French. Although there is a bit of a solution in that they were offered a sum of money, a sum of gold to go away. So the French bring the gold, but there's an extra catch. After they bring the gold, the Vikings stay an extra month, and eventually the French ask, why are you staying? Why are you still here? And the Vikings say, oh, our king is very sick. He can't travel. And Ragnar basically makes this request. When I die, I want a proper Christian burial. So the French agree to provide that. And there are a few twists in this episode. Now, if you want my encapsulated review of this episode, if you want a real quick sum up of my opinion, the drama was great, the twists were great, the acting was great. It brilliantly ended the season. It brought the Paris arc to a satisfying conclusion, and I loved it, and I can't wait for season 4, but from this point on, there are going to be heavy spoilers, so if you haven't watched the episode, what are you doing here? Go watch it right now. So, it turns out that this whole Christian burial thing was all a ruse for Ragnar to get himself into the city, take a hostage, and open the gates for the rest of the Vikings to storm the city and raid it. So that plan succeeds. I mean, during the funeral service, because the conditions are you must carry the coffin in with a group of unarmed men. So that is supposedly what they do. So a small group of Vikings carry the coffin right into the center of the city, into the church, and this funeral service is going on. It's very somber, and this is after the Vikings have all done their mourning and basically said their final words to Ragnar. So you're thinking, okay, Ragnar is dead, so where is it going to go from here? But then all of a sudden, just out of nowhere, I love how this was played. Just completely, it was almost a jump scare. It almost made me jump. Where middle of the service, very somber, it's kind of zooming in on the coffin, and all of a sudden, pop, the lid comes off, and Ragnar gets out, pulls a knife. The guys who were supposedly unarmed get a bunch of weapons out of the coffin, and Ragnar he has Emperor Charles at knife point, and one thing I really love is that he says two words that perfectly sum up how his plan went, and how he would react now that his plan has come to fruition. Two words. He says two words when he has Charles at knife point, and these two words are perfect. He says, "I win." What else could he say? He's beaten Emperor Charles. He's conquered France, or he's conquered Paris. He's actually I mean, he was the only one to actually successfully get into the city and then subsequently get his men into the city because he takes Princess Gisla hostage and backs up to the gate, cuts the rope on the gate, and then the rest of his men storm the city and raid and pillage and do whatever they want. Take even more spoils that they were originally paid to go away with, while Ragnar just sort of collapses in his son's arms and lets his men do all the fighting. So, which, because he is still sick. But that whole twist, first of all, I really love the way it played with your expectations. And this actually brings me on to somewhat of a side point in that any show that can actually make me doubt how things are going to play out, even though it is part of history, clearly they are doing something right, because I knew from day one Ragnar in the actual Norse legend, he was killed by being tossed into a pit of snakes in I believe Northumbria by King Aela. Okay? But the way that it's been playing out over the past couple episodes, it really seemed like this was going to be his last hurrah. Which, no telling how much longer he's going to be around, and that's what kind of makes me sad because he's such a great character and played so well by Travis Fimmel. But the way that it was going, it seemed like he was really just ready to give up. He was ready to give up on the rating. He was ready to give up on basically everything that he had planned on, because he just wanted to see his friend again. So although prior to this episode I did kind of stop and think, some things just don't add up. For instance, when he actually stopped to talk to Athelstan after the initial attack on the Paris walls, he was talking to Athelstan like through the afterlife. He was basically talking to himself, and he basically said, Athelstan, Paris is everything you said it would be, and I'm bound and determined to conquer it. Okay, so clearly he didn't say that to anyone else. He was basically announcing his own plans. He was basically being brutally honest with himself, in that he was announcing his plans. So the fact that he would essentially give up and prepare to die, even if he was wounded, the fact that he would essentially give up and prepare to die after he had already declared that he was determined to conquer Paris by any means necessary, did seem a little off. Okay, so after I stopped and thought about that, I was thinking, okay, there has to be a little bit more to this. And that feeling was further strengthened, and the ending was actually further foreshadowed by what he said to Bjorn. In that, he says to Bjorn, when you are king, you have to rule with your mind, not your heart. And that actually got me thinking, Ragnar's supposed intention to essentially give up and go to heaven with Athelstan seemed like an action that was very much one of impulse, one that was brought about by what he wanted in his heart, rather than what strategically made sense. So I was thinking, okay, well, either he's a hypocrite, or again, there's something more to this. But I actually thought the twist, those two little scenes, and maybe one or two more that I may have missed, beautifully foreshadowed the upcoming twist, and the twist itself was done so well. So yeah, that actually ended the Paris arc on a very high note, both dramatically and in terms of storytelling, because it was just a brilliant move. And the fact that Ragnar actually won, and the fact that Ragnar took that pleasure in winning. He actually said, "I win." Man, that was a great moment. And and it actually goes along with the seer's prophecy in that Paris will be conquered by the dead. Well, Ragnar, by all accounts, or by anyone's guess, was dead. So technically you could argue, well, he was alive, but but you see what I mean. You see what I mean in this, in that the seer's prophecy sort of makes sense if when you actually take the whole scenario and how it played out and apply the prophecy to it. So yeah, narratively, this episode had me on the edge of my seat, and even a lot of the character moments I thought were really well done. First of all, Rollo, we've again established that Rollo, yeah, he loves his brother, but again, when he's saying his supposed final words to Ragnar, he's basically saying, I've always resented you. I've always felt that you were the favorite of the gods, and I feel that I've lost so much because of you, because of the opportunities that you've been presented that I've been robbed of. So that was actually followed up with something at the end of the episode, in that Emperor Charles, he actually says, he's actually talking to Princess Gisla. He's basically saying, in order for them to guarantee not to attack again, I have to offer them something much more precious than money, which is what I tried. I tried it, it didn't work. So I offered Rollo your hand in marriage, and Gisla is disgusted. So so not only does Rollo get to marry the princess, but in addition, he gets his own piece of land, and he also gets the title of Duke. All he has to do is defend the city from his brother, when his brother returns in the spring with more men. All right, so it shouldn't be too difficult, and I'm interested to see where that plays out, if it's going to lead to an all-out battle like at the beginning of season 2, or if they're going to try and settle it in a more diplomatic way, since they are brothers. But Rollo finally getting some recognition, and you can tell, written plain on Clive Standon's face, the satisfaction at finally getting some power, finally getting some recognition, and this was actually a scene that I really loved. Another scene that I really loved in this episode, in that he comes into the hall, he comes into the palace, into the city, to make terms with the French, and Princess Gisla stands up and basically gives this impassioned speech in French about how I would rather lose my virtue to an animal than this man. I will not marry this man. Just this really long speech about how disgusted she is by her situation, and hurling all of these insults at Rollo. And she's like, he makes me want to vomit, and on like this. It goes on for has to be a solid minute. And Rollo, he's not getting any of this, because he doesn't speak French, and he's looking at the interpreter going like, what is she saying? And the interpreter is not really getting a chance to speak. And when she's done, what else could he say? He just takes a few steps forward and just sort of, he's you can tell he's trying to think of the word. He's like, hello. He says the Spanish equivalent of hello. So so that scene was just so funny. And yeah, and in addition, Floki, the relationship between Floki and Ragnar is at a new and interesting place at the end of this episode, in that Ragnar actually comes out and says at the end of the episode, I know you killed Athelstan. And Floki, when he says his final words to Ragnar's coffin, he basically says, I knew it. You are my oldest friend. I tried to warn you. I love you with all my heart, but you just would not listen to me. You were just like, oh, it's only Floki. I don't have to pay him any mind. And now look where it's gotten you. Give my regards to Athelstan. So Floki, you really get the sense, especially in this episode, that nothing he's done up to this point has been purely malicious. He's not trying to be malicious. He's just very dead set in his own ways, and I think that really comes out in this episode, and it really comes back to bite him, because he tries to make amends with Helga, and she's not having any of it, because clearly he hasn't learned anything. So now that he knows that Ragnar knew all along that he killed Athelstan, it's going to be interesting to see where it goes from there, if he's actually going to put two and two together and actually ask Ragnar, Did you set me up to fail at Paris? Which he probably can put two and two together because Ragnar, he wanted to punish Floki. He wanted to make him suffer before he actually came out and said, I know you killed Athelstan, which that was a pretty sadistically brilliant move on Ragnar's part. And yeah, really enjoyed this one. And even Bjorn. Bjorn actually got a chance to step up as a leader, more so than he did in the initial siege on Paris, where he was sort of leading his own group of troops up the ladder. He was trying to lead them up the ladder, and he actually took responsibility for a small group of troops on the battlefield out of instinct. But here he's actually put in charge of the plan. Ragnar confides in him without telling anyone else. So the fact that Ragnar now trusts his son to that extent, and with that sort of responsibility, to the point where the entire raid hinges on this plan's success, I actually thought was a really good series of moments for Bjorn. So yeah, I really love this one. I'm very sad to see that Vikings is not going to come back until 2016. But I tell you what, Game of Thrones, Season 5 of Game of Thrones is going to be hard-pressed to top Season 3 of Vikings. Now, as for whether or not I liked it better than Season 2, I think they're about on par, honestly. I think the fact that I'm not quite as blown away with Season 3 as I was with Season 2 is not because Season 3 goes down in quality or anything. I think it maintains the quality, and in some areas I think it actually improves, especially in some of the character moments. And even the character deaths, which I normally object to. I actually thought the character deaths were done well, and the final twist involving Ragnar's supposed death was brilliant. But I think the thing was, in between seasons 1 and 2, Vikings went from a show that I really liked, a very good show, to season 2, where it basically fixed all of the problems that were in season 1 and became a great show, a show that I can wholeheartedly say that I love. Season 3, on the other hand, it didn't really go through that drastic improvement in quality. It sort of maintained its quality in most areas and slightly improved the quality in other areas. So there's really not much more it could do except go slightly up because the quality was already so high in season 2. Yeah, really loved this show, really loved this episode. I thought it was a great way to cap off another great season of Vikings. Can't wait for season 4. I wish the actual historical character of Ragnar was around longer because I'm just loving Travis Fimmel's portrayal of the character. So a part of me is sad to see him go, or will be sad to see him go. But another part of me is sort of interested to see how they're going to transition to essentially a new main character, or if they're going to try and make it a little bit more of an ensemble and focus on all of the characters as opposed to, well, they already are sort of focusing on all the characters, but actually not have a central main character make it completely an ensemble, whereas now you have a central main character in Ragnar, but mixing it in with all these other colorful characters. So yeah, I'm very interested to see where it's going to go. I know I went a little long-winded on this one, but I can't say enough good things about this show. So until next time.